There are proofs of an organized crime nature since before our nation's founding, before all modern nations' founding. Interscience nature of organized crime. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a police form. I'm not a criminal. Um, but there are proofs, for example, that the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil from the Old Testament. This is a metaphor in relationship when Adam and Eve take fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This is from an organized crime that's educational. It's interscience, a nature of it, and it's in relationship to linguistic sabotage. That free speech, our founders left us proofs to explain that haven't been explained with forced summary convictions of them that didn't take into account proofs of this nature of organized crime that are only let realized legal natures were only let realized to natures incapable of describing and worse being roles in it. In other words, this is how every nation lost. See, in other words, there are proofs that pantheism was originally about the science about the one unchanging positive space nature identity and demonstration to us all actively. And science reveals proofs of it being actively in demonstration to us and need to have the sciences as understood and conceived let be revealed to one body and one act, one identity for one identity. This is why we are a species. So the ancients facilitated a means to perpetuate nations only realized as retreat natures in relationship to negative value nature progressions. They don't have words for because it's with a forced shared policing of our nations. And it's not to divide from it because the internation science was originally revealed for the health of our. There are proofs that internation science is what really originally revealed not only English, but Etruscan Rome. See, so in other words, even identities of nations can't account for. In other words, they're pseudo identities, self-defending that as evidence fabrication natures. What nations really were are phenomena in relationship to active value nature system and demonstration of us to us, but with its demonstrations actively obfuscated since ancient times, and natures of logic justified that are time impositions since ancient times. In other words, so we have a interscience nature of organized crime, per facts, per proofs. In other words, in relationship to an organized crime, lawyers and legal books they use terms like criminal enterprise to explain what an organized crime is, which is an internation facilitated or internationally facilitated now between all nations. In other words, this is a nature of organized crime that is not facilitated to one by one nation, but what is invested to and through and as the identities of nations forced to share negotiations with the logic and with the law that are laws in relationship to how they are roles to the sabotage of the law of truth and of its a real ratiocination, which entertains not the identities of nations apart from each other, and which entertains not um, positions claiming stability in relationship to business forced to, to be on the edge of war with nuclear weapons with this. And in other words, wars weren't natural, but per criminal persuasions that they lost containment of in ancient times. And this was with theater to trick the nations not to be able to trust and to be hurt by internation science. So there are, for example, in the dreams of our founders, they can't even, and even our modern presidents, they don't have free speech. There are proofs of it. For example, with Africa, African nations can't even agree about what the real logistical impositions upon Africa are, because everyone leaves the complex litigation distinctions in nature of facts treatments out of it, because that we have legal natures only let realized to roles, facilitating bottom down linguistic extortions and terror roles without realizing, just by relying on experts and what maintains to all areas, which everyone's missing. It's with our standards, for example. You look at how many, since founding, we've had exploited areas that aren't let a voice and are forced to be insidious passions to denying facts treatments. And then those fact treatments are with natures of employment invested upon the exploitation uh, of these exploited areas and colleges. I mean, in all kinds of all campuses, including in particular healthcare campuses too, juxtaposed with uh, this is what we lost to in founding, juxtaposed with terror branches only let realized per geopolitical science positions. And peace, peace relationships forced between agencies and natures of business agreements in contrasting to wars. But those wars, but that's not. In other words, you can't understand identity in relation to contrast, but through correlation, because only what's inherent to all temporary value natures is unchanging positive. And consciousness is a temporary value nature. But to understand how it is about positive value nature, we must understand nature inherent to it, and nature inherent to all physical values, and actively in relationship to what is actively in diffusion through Earth, which is consciousness, which is nature inherent to consciousness. Actually, you know, consciousness free spells out free. Freedom raises energy's energy. Energy's energy. Energy's energy is not consciousness, which is energy, but is energy inherent to consciousness. We all share the same positive identity, and we must understand the same nature of organized crime that we felt to bottom up and top down distinctly. So, in other words, we have natures of bottom up opinions that are looking to hurt conviction natures in relationship to treatments of facts, in relationship to international issues that are with facts treatments and morality treatments that are forced to be measured when our leaders are speak to us. But they're obligated to, but they're also obligated to not to, because of the nature of our original forced retreats to what we lost to it in founding, entrenched here, and with and how it was and is a method to executive forms, to interbranch forms of only let them trained, rely upon facts treatments that are self-defeating and breached in ways that even they don't understand, because everyone's seen there's herd conviction natures to all areas with our crime statistics, not by accident. This is in relationship to interscience problems. In other words, these campuses failed our streets not by accident, not because of money, because we put money and physics before truth and metaphysics, which always has to come first. Because when you have the sciences accurately understood, and you have to understand how value A is a radical and immediate space nature, distinctly in relationship to overall space nature, where it's non-changing. In other words, this is how we learn about how correlation. In the other videos, I mentioned radical value A, which is capital value A of the English language. You know, everything that is not the same, that positive identity progressively is longed away from it, and everything else that is capable of being that, and that is temporarily that, it is inherently longing to that first. That's value al, space nature's positive identity, before it is even, and with being Arabic's definite article, and English the indefinite right to left. In English, the definite article is left to right. Notice Latin is juxtaposed with our language because there are proofs that, for example, Sharia law, there are proofs that interscience organized crime categorically has people defending the definitions of the Quran that it warns against, because the conversation is not being forced on the Quran. And the reason it's not being forced on the Quran is by how the Quran has one conversation in relationship to truth conversation, and another conversation in relationship to where and how the nations are forced to defend pseudo identities. In other words, the body of Islam is Saudi Arabia, but the body of consciousness is another body, and both of them have inherent to them, all temporary value natures have inherent the same positive value nature system. In other words, space nature is one body, as one body, has only one positive identity. In other words, we have all kinds of parts of our body, but we have one positive identity that they all share. And this is a demonstration of what is actively in demonstration to us as the cause of evolution, when let be. But we have it obfuscated because we have sciences physical propagating only let realized, cultivating propagations of physical delusions, interscience. In other words, with religions too, so we don't have real facts treatments allowing capable. No, we have forced. They're forcing an industry with criminal industry positions maintained in relationship to what everyone was taken as ours in relationship to. In other words, everyone, and we're taken to ulterior from natural value nature system criminally. So there are by a criminal enterprise. And this was to facilitate nations to roles with what they didn't understand in relationship to negative value nature progressions held to all areas of nations. Because now the educational system is being used to facilitate evil. So we have conviction natures created by what is guised as good. And since ancient times, we all must turn, we should, religion train. There is one species. None of our nations are tame. Just see their ties. It's all these guys. Realize. So, in other words, we lost on significant fronts in the American Revolution. And for example, there are proofs that our nations do business, but they're forcing the same thing they're doing with Russia. They're forcing only they can be the people with the internation connections. In other words, we should have all kinds. When there's bombs involved, we should set up more connections between the world too. And then that's how you heal the species. You don't leave it with bombs going to play out, and negative value nature progressions ignored and denied by the sciences, led to hide behind facts, treatments, and entertain that are offensive impositions to actual reality. So we have to set up. We have to cease the wars. And put means there. They did colonization also with this. They tactically denatured the landscapes of the world. They put all the look how the world has a conformity to infrastructure that colonization's terror laws put in place. In other words, that's one way to correlate proofs that every nation fell to the same organized crime methods that were inter-science before our nation. In other words, they stole inter-nation science from its actual nature, using it to hurt nations, knowing that nations would become reaction natures, retreat natures in relationship to it, not trusting inter-nation science, while at the same time they were facilitating themselves as an organized crime, a database, a terror database relationship to all areas, and inter-science, using that between nations, gradually forcing this in, forcing humanity into as a criminal insidiousness nature. That's what happens when taking from ulterior from natural value nature systems per criminal persuasions. That's what happens when Adam and Eve take the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam stands for the subject, Eve stands for the verb. This is in relationship to what ancient revelations were that were criminally re-engineered to be perpetuated, misunderstood. For example, with regards to the predicate act, which is something caused by a criminal enterprise. Now, I'm speaking from in the context where religions are demonstrating that our legal natures don't have and are invested not to have the credibility to speak for the law, and as ours. That's that. In other words, that was also facilitated when they put shock and awe, when they juxtaposed that with the coalition needed to fight these wars that are protracting since ancient times in relationship to negative value nature progressions only let realized, entertained, and blamed on other lies and delusions. There are proofs that Sharia law is really in relationship to the body. In other words, the Quran values unbeliever who still believes in that an overall unchanging not God, in demonstration to one system in demonstration to us, values the unbelievers that are not with the criminal insidiousness. It doesn't use this word criminal insidiousness, but this is implied with the criminal insidiousness, which is forced by criminally legalized. So that's how it was forced on nations, because it wasn't forced on one, but on all, entertained to what they don't understand. Entertains what perpetuates inter-science justifications and roles, facilitating lies with facts treatments, facilitating delusion propagations with facts treatments. And that's so with human nature, because now it's the nature of our treatments of finite facts that are also being exploited to all areas, invested to businesses, art, and to artistically to maintain us nations incapable of not being contained by what we have, a species value nature containment system that is an organized crime method that is most logical and demonstrably what religions are counterfronts to, because it's a multi-front organized crime method again. Organized before we have to understand the crime, the database terror database methods and relationships that colonization used with terror laws to also not just against witches and slavery and all kinds of other terror laws. It was also in relationship to the pattern of the houses throughout the world and the means to them, and this is what denatured the entire world. This is all landscape theater. When I say read the natives' dreams, I saw that on YouTube. A Native American chief understands that we all must read each other's dreams. And in other words, in relationship to the landscape first and to waters. But these were all put underground before our modern times. So we have to understand how those terror laws and why they were in relationship to an Oz that kings and queens didn't understand. In other words, they also, for example, the first general who came over here to engage um, George Washington, who was a English general first, what was General Clinton. We have to understand how the American Revolution was a tactic to force the identity that General Clinton was fighting for, to force it to our side, which, because in other words, he was only one general in our army, and the army too didn't understand, would only let them realize trained by nations, only let realize trained per criminal influences with the sciences forced internation before them. In other words, they had legal natures only let realize the database, terror database relationships as well, but these not on the record because they don't want the nations to understand the the freedom to be able to defend free speech and real rights, which begin with native rights in American landscape. And to understand what really challenges Native American rights, we have to understand the insanity of forced negotiations and forced business stability dictates that are really to the maintenance of there's multi-front guises, because they're the only ones that control the nature of the business between our nations too, and keeping that a nature that's you know all military and all kind of and policing and jail oriented and psychology oriented. I'm not a doctor. There are proofs that psychology delusion propagates as an industry, for example, in relationship to this internation with its roles with um, internation prison positions, them forcing drugs on inmates. They even do it in the areas per reported proofs to the facilitation of evidence fabrication methods using the people who sell drugs through time in conjunction with interbranch families and with healthcare. In other words, everyone's and this is with and how stewards of our branches and their family members get involved with needs to tell lies that are finite in conjunction with foreign terror groups, like with the narratives with ISIS, for example, the latest internation terror group. We just have to understand our nation's original forced internation terror group juxtapositions and natures of organized crime against Native Americans, denaturing their landscape. Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Museum is the oldest Native American museum in America. They only remember part of it. For example, too, when I said pantheism is about the one positive identity, space nature identity, and demonstration to all the nations actively. In other words, we are one body species, to be able to correlate the difference between actual positive good and negative positive value nature good. Temporary value nature is negative value nature, but inherent to all temporary value natures is unchanging positive value nature. That's how the value W works from inside of physics as unchanging alpha nature. Alpha nature is in relationship to how in immediate space value nature, value A is a radical. Overall, it is an unchanging radical as an identity, not as a polarity nature, but as a cause to polarity nature, which is Allah, which is value, spells it. This is why it spells it two different ways. And this is in relationship to how the English language works two different ways. In other words, Z, the top of the Z, is pointing back towards A. When the nature of unchanging positive identity, space nature identity is realized here, that forces evolution. The bottom of the Z, when this is not our identity, This is with showing what lethal hadith is. Force our value force from here, all directions, and the bottom of the Z. And this is ancient algebraic consciousness. That's probably what they called it, in other words. And this is also in relationship to how value an, which is the indefinite article, one of the two indefinite articles in English, when either of the indefinite articles are the value inherent to themselves. Value, that value, visible value, is value AH, which is the N plus the extension up to H. That's to the top of the Z, for example. That correlates with the top of the Z and with the nature that's causing positive value nature progressions forced back to A. This is also in relationship to why Jesus Christ had cipher with his halo, illuminating A through W, and with the alpha and the omega written that way. So, never put physics before metaphysics, and understand that before they take the resources and put strains on the resources, for example, in Africa, they're forcing insanity claims stability in relationship